She is the chief federal law enforcement officer in New Hampshire, nominated by President Biden, confirmed by the U.S. Senate last year. U.S. Attorney for the District of New Hampshire, Jane Young, is our guest this morning. Attorney Young, thanks for being here with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So your office made some news last month when it announced it was adding more federal prosecutors to focus on things like hate crimes, civil rights, and even domestic terrorism. And the last one caught my eye. When you hear about domestic terrorism in New Hampshire, I was surprised. Is this something we're seeing right now in various forms in the Granite State?
So in the president's budget last year, we applied for and were granted 2 additional positions. So the domestic terrorism position is also a position for violent crime. So we certainly have seen a rise in violent crime, especially with gun violence. And so we are going to hire an attorney that will focus on both of those aspects that we see a rise in the Granite State.
And I remember when this came out, we talked to you about it, and you said that we've seen a rise in violent extremism. What form has that taken here in New Hampshire?
So recently we have seen threats to elected officials that we have worked on. We have prosecuted quickly. We also have a case that's pending now that there was an individual outside of school with a weapon. So these are matters that are the utmost importance to the administration, to the Department of Justice, and to my office.
And obviously, before this, you held a long career in the state of New Hampshire, as a prosecutor. Are we seeing something new right now when it comes to cases like this in the Granite State and nationwide, or is this something we've always been seeing and now there's just more of a focus on trying to have prosecutors that handle that day to day?
I think that it's a combination. In my prior job, we dealt mostly with drug crimes and with homicides. And in this new role, we have expansive resources dealing with the FBI and with our other federal partners. So I think we have a greater window into that and a greater commitment in ensuring that we ferret out these activities and we address them before we have an incident here that leads to death or mass destruction.
And for the other new prosecutorial role, we'll be focusing on civil rights, things like hate crimes, which actually, in the last few months and maybe even year plus, we've been reporting on a lot recently here in New Hampshire. Has your office heard about a rise when it comes to the Granite State and dealing with hate crimes or hate crime incidents?
So we have seen that. We have seen protests that we are cognizant of both in the capital city. We hosted an event in Manchester to bring attention to what these crimes are. I have been out in the community. I have spoken with leaders in different religious groups, and they've talked about feeling concerned that there are some worshipers that don't want to go to the houses of worship because they are concerned. So we need to marshal all the resources so people can go to church, can go to the synagogue, can go to their house of worship. And so we were lucky. There were 60 positions, civil rights positions. We applied for one of those positions, and we were one of the lucky offices that received one of those positions. So we have that position advertised now, and we are looking to fill it hopefully by late fall, early winter.
And when you look at this aspect of potential casework, it's tough too, because there's also free speech concerns. Sometimes despite how putrid or abhorrent we think the speech might be, it could also be protected speech. How does your office imagine finding that balancing act?
So we applied for this position to both be a criminal prosecutor and have civil enforcement action. So we'll look at fair housing. With elections coming up, we will look at voting rights. But a key aspect of this position will be to go out into the communities, to engage with the people in the communities, with the religious leaders, with law enforcement, with other stakeholders, to explain where that line is, what is permissible, what is not permissible. We have a very close working relationship with the Attorney General's office, with the Civil Rights Unit there. So we are doing a lot of activities together, and part of this position is just that education component to the public at large. So they know what their rights are, but they also will understand when their rights are violated. And if rights are not violated, if something, could be horrific speech but is protected, people will understand that we are still there, and we are there to listen to them, and we will help them to educate them however we can.
As the chief federal law enforcement officer here in the state of New Hampshire, you've certainly been on the front lines of our state's battle to stop the flood of deadly drugs into the state. You know, we just got the new overdose numbers in for 2022. 486 people died of a drug overdose. Marks the highest number of overdose deaths since 2017. And we're actually, New Hampshire is far exceeding what's been happening across the country. 80% of the deaths in New Hampshire involved fentanyl. Give us kind of the status report of where this battle is from your office's perspective.
So again, we are engaging across all forms of law enforcement. We have conversations with the chiefs. I have conversations with my federal partners on a monthly basis. We are looking to do what we can to disrupt the flow, to dismantle the organizations, and then when people are able to be charged on a federal level, to ensure that they face the maximum possible penalty upon conviction.
Yeah, it was just, I believe it was last month, 22 people facing charges in connection with what was being described as a sophisticated drug trafficking organization that was broken up, your office and federal partners and local partners. Is it getting harder to find and disrupt these organizations because they are becoming more sophisticated in many ways, trying to get around the work that you do and the work that your law enforcement partners do?
The investigators that we work with are dogged. They will work around the clock. They are also creative in the way of thinking, but I think what we have learned is that we have to marshal our resources. That is a perfect example. No one agency, whether it's federal or local, can do it on their own. So my goal is to bring people into the room, to have discussions on a monthly basis, to engage with my state and local prosecutorial partners, to ask, what are you doing? You know, we have guidelines in place of what cases that we will take, again, with a focused approach to disrupt and to dismantle and to prosecute and remove people from the streets who are flooding our streets with these drugs.
And obviously a holistic approach is needed to it. We can't prosecute our way out of this. Is that sort of frustrating that, you know, you can only be one component of this, trying to create the solution overall?
No, I mean, I certainly recognize that there's a mental health component to this, and so I think we have to get in the room together to discuss it. Certainly there's money coming into the state, and I know that the Deputy Attorney General is sort of actively engaged in what he can do to address some of those issues. We're talking with the local county jails as to what they can do and on the state level, so we are trying to do, but you need somebody to do that, and I think I'm somewhat uniquely equipped to do that, given my background at the county, state, and now federal level, that I'm able to sort of cut through some of that and understand what those issues are and, quite frankly, where cases should be prosecuted.
And Attorney Young, we've been hearing a lot more about China's alleged role in all of this, where now that's the synthetic opioids and synthetic fentanyl getting into the drug supply here, not just across the country, but especially in New Hampshire, with much more of the folks who are dying from this, it being fentanyl. It's cheaper to create in China, the synthetic version of it. Does that make it tougher from a prosecutor standpoint to be able to hold some of these actors accountable if they are in places like Mexico or China? Or, you know, with the reach of the FBI and other agencies, do you feel like you can actually target supply areas?
So we will follow the evidence wherever it takes us. What we have seen, though, is New Hampshire is an end user state, so most of the fentanyl is coming in from somewhere else. It's not being compounded here. But if it can't be prosecuted in this jurisdiction, there are other U.S. attorneys' offices across the country that work closely with each other. They will face their day in a courtroom, whether it's in New Hampshire or another jurisdiction, if there is evidence to prove them guilty of a crime.
I also wanted to ask you about another area in which we've seen your office deal with. A number of people recently been prosecuted, were ultimately convicted for stealing dozens of guns from multiple New Hampshire firearm stores and then selling them elsewhere. You pointed out at the time that stolen firearms are often what fuels gun violence. What did you mean by that?
So, unfortunately, what I have learned in this position is that we are a source state for weapons, that weapons come from New Hampshire and go to other states where they are used in crimes, whether it's through trading, whether it's through straw purchases, or in the cases that you reference, whether it's in burglaries. Those guns aren't going into law-abiding hands, aren't going to the individuals who are using them for their own protection or for hunting. They're going to fuel crimes. And it's our responsibility to stop those, again, to find those individuals, whether they're straw purchasers or they're stealing them from the FFLs, and prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law.
Now, is there something unique about New Hampshire that makes it easier for bad actors, so to speak, to get their hands on these weapons?
So what we had seen in the cases that we have prosecuted recently are individuals that are coming from other states, targeting the FFLs and going in and stealing very specific weapons and then reselling them in their areas, or at least getting them into hands of other individuals who use them for crimes.
And then according to the most recent numbers, 59 firearms, this was 2021 numbers, we're still in New Hampshire. It was the most in New England. What else beyond just prosecuting would you like to see done, or what else could be done to limit the number of firearms that are leaving the state for those purposes?
Certainly the message has to be out there to individuals who purchase weapons for their family or friends who know that the other person is prohibited. They too are committing a crime, so that message is an important message to get out.
And in the last couple of minutes we have here, I wanted to ask you about kind of the broader picture. It seems in the last couple of years, a lot of federal agencies have come under attack, a lot of federal prosecutors have come under attack, and the role of justice in this country has, writ large, kind of been part of the larger political conversation. How do you make sure your office is staying away from that political conversation and focused on the narrow task of justice?
We follow the facts, and we follow those facts wherever they lead us. We determine if those facts are in fact a crime. We don't look at sort of anybody's political philosophy. We just look at the facts and whether that becomes a crime or not.
Has this hypercharged environment made your office's job tougher every day?
I have not seen it here in New Hampshire, luckily.
That is nice to hear. And we appreciate your expertise this morning. U.S. Attorney Jane Young, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.